What's up, spaceflight enthusiasts and scale modelers? Welcome to a very special model kit discussion. It's your host, Ray. Today I'll be discussing the Revell 1/72 scale Space Shuttle 40th Anniversary Kit. In this video I will talk about the building process and everything I think a scale modeler should know before building this kit. That being said, this will be a pretty long video, so sit back, relax, and prepare for liftoff. Here we go. Starting off with some background information about this kit and the Revell Space Shuttle. This kit was released in 2020, just shy of 40 years after the first Space Shuttle mission was launched in 1981. Do not let this recent release date fool you though, since this kit is very much a kit of the past. Revell first developed toolings for plastic space shuttle kits in the late 1970s. Since then, Revell hasn't bothered to update or replace them, despite numerous changes to the space shuttle during the 30-year program. The problem with this is that the parts are crude and unrefined, therefore making assembly arduous and difficult. The parts also have a number of inaccuracies as well. When building this kit, a few modifications and fixes were necessary to get everything to fit together properly. I will cover specific areas later. Now for the kit itself. The kit comprises of 6 sprues of white plastic, 1 clear plastic sprue, an instruction booklet, and a decal sheet. The box is a large top opener at a length of 60 centimeters, width of 11.5 centimeters, and a height of 42 centimeters. There are 111 parts to construct the orbiter, flight deck, payload bay interior, and 2 figures. This kit does not include parts for the external tank and solid rocket boosters. When completed, the spacecraft is a monster in size, coming in with a length of 48 centimeters, a wingspan of 34 centimeters, and a height of 24.5 centimeters from the ground to the top of the vertical stabilizer with the gear extended. This model weighs just shy of 1 kilogram. In American, it's big, and it's heavy. When fully assembled, the model is designed to have an interactive payload bay, rudder, and body flap. A crew cabin cover is included to allow for access to the flight deck. This kit also features raised details to depict the thermal protection tiles found on the shuttle's underside, wings, and parts of the fuselage. Unfortunately, the tiles are about twice the size they should be. In Revell's defense, this is the only plastic kit with such extensive raised tile details, so at least we get tile details in the first place. The instructions are mostly clear for assembly. However, they aren't very good for paint guidance and decal application. A number of decals are incorrectly numbered or outright unaccounted for, leaving us completely in the dark about where they go. This kit contains markings for the orbiters Columbia, Discovery, Atlantis, and Endeavour in the post-1998 marking scheme with the NASA meatball logos. This is quite a letdown since the box art depicts the shuttle in the markings for mission STS-1, which falls under the pre-1998 marking scheme with the NASA worm logos. This kit also ignores Challenger, which I find really stupid since with the way the tiles are depicted, the only orbiters you can build accurately without extensive modification are Columbia up to STS-9 and Challenger for the entirety of its career. I built 2 of these kits. For the first one, I built Columbia in its final configuration, which flew on missions STS-109 and STS-107. It's not the most accurate replica, but I'm happy with the way it turned out anyway. For the second one, I built Challenger in its final configuration, which flew on missions STS-51B, STS-51F, STS-61A, and STS-51L. Once I finished it, it was sold to someone who I built it for. Now I will discuss the building process in the order in which the instructions have us build the model. This will be followed by painting, then decal application and fine detailing. At the end, I will give my overall opinion on the kit and provide some third-party accessories which may help you on your build. We start building the kit with the assembly of the flight deck. The included flight deck is overall inaccurate to the interior of the real shuttle, especially when compared to the glass cockpit used in later missions. Construction is simple, but fitting the parts together is rather difficult due to crude tooling. I had particular difficulty with the seats and parts 9 and 10. 16 decals are dedicated to this section alone, making for a decent-looking flight deck. The instructions provide no clues or help for the correct orientation and placement for some of these decals, specifically decals 9, 11, 13, 15, 16, 18, and 19. I studied the images on the completed model on the box art and used those for reference to ensure correct placement and orientation. I made makeshift heads-up displays out of paper and spare clear plastic to add to the detail of the crew cabin. Next, the instructions have us attach the cockpit windows, front RCS thrusters, and nose gear bay to the fuselage halves. The cockpit windows fit very tightly to the plastic, and a lot of force is required to get them to fit properly. Even after attachment, large gaps are left behind, so they really aren't that good. The tile pattern on the front RCS panel is inaccurate, but it fits into the slot relatively well after some sanding. The nose gear bay is difficult to fit into the fuselage as well. Up next is the payload bay. It's comprised of 3 parts, 2 sections for the forward and aft bulkheads, and 1 bathtub-style part for the bottom of the bay. Even these parts are stubborn when fit together, requiring some sanding and cutting before they fit together at all, after which substantial force is required to hold the parts together while the glue dries. Once assembled, there is very little detail, and the detail that is present is inaccurate to the real shuttle. In Revell's defense, however, the payload bay configuration was different for every mission, so making a generic design to compensate would be difficult. Still, they could have done a better job. On the forward section, the payload bay windows attach from the outside. Like the cockpit windows, they fit horribly and require cutting and sanding to fit properly. The rudder is designed to move freely, up to about 90 degrees to either side. The rudder is assembled by putting 2 halves together. It has 2 rods which go into cavities in the vertical stabilizer, which allow it to move. The spacecraft begins to take form at this stage, with both fuselage halves coming together. This step is arguably one of the most difficult and tedious processes involved with building this kit due to the atrocious tooling of the parts. My goal was to make use of minimal sanding in order to preserve the tile details, however this was incredibly difficult to achieve. I first attached the flight deck to the forward bulkhead of the assembled payload bay. I attached these parts to the right fuselage half, then glued the 2 halves together. It took me nearly an hour to complete this for both of my builds, and it was impossible to achieve perfect alignment. Even after fitting the parts together, half of the tile details on the top half of the nose section didn't even align properly. Really poor job done by Revell on the tooling here. For my build of Columbia, I needed to add the silts pod. I did this by cutting a cavity in the top of the vertical stabilizer that was the same diameter of the pod, about 1/4 of an inch. I also shortened the top rudder rod to make room for the pod. I used a 1/4 inch plastic cylinder and sanded it down to conform to the stabilizer surface. After this, I used thin pieces of burned and stretched plastic to add raised tiles. The configuration I did is by no means accurate, I just wanted tiles on the pod. I also added the drag chute compartment on Columbia. This was done by cutting the designated portion of the vertical stabilizer and adding styrene blocks to form the compartment. I did not redo the tiles in this area because there were no tiles on the drag chute for any of the orbiters, and I was too lazy. After the fuselage halves are attached, another tedious step awaits, the attachment of the bottom half of the orbiter. This is the largest piece in this kit, and it is difficult to attach to the assembled fuselage while keeping everything aligned. After attaching the bottom half, the top halves of the wings are attached. Even after aligning everything to the best of my abilities, large gaps between the top and bottom halves of the wings were present which required filling. These gaps were most prominent on the chines. Once complete, the fit between all these parts is adequate. Not the best, but it could be worse. The body flap assembly is similar to the rudder. 2 halves come together, and then it is joined to the fuselage by a rod and cavity system. It doesn't move as freely as the rudder, but it still moves with relative ease. Unfortunately, it tends to scratch against the rest of the spacecraft when moved, therefore scratching the paint. Now for attaching the aft bulkhead. It fits decently, though the bottom portion of the sides simply doesn't close the gap between the fuselage and the part, requiring filling and sanding. The race detail here in no way depicts any tiles like the ones on the real orbiter. Next up, the Orbital Maneuvering System pods, or OMS pods. This part is arguably the most infuriating out of all of them, since they fit awkwardly to the orbiter and aft bulkhead. Again, gaps are left behind, requiring extensive filling. I took 4 attempts to fill the gaps on my Columbia build, and 3 on my Challenger build. The tiled section on the bottom of the OMS pods is not depicted anywhere either. I used styrene plastic to recreate these. Using the measurements on the paint guide will help you create the correct shape if you choose to do this. I'm starting to realize why they left out Challenger on the decal markings, since no matter which orbiter you build, the kit itself is a Challenger. Building the rear RCS thrusters is extremely annoying. These parts come together horribly, sometimes leaving gaps up to 2 millimeters in length, which is a very large gap for a model of this size. Again, sanding and filling are required to fix the major gaps left behind. Attaching the nozzles is relatively easy though, requiring a firm push to get them into place properly. The OMS rockets are simple, with 2 halves coming together to form the engine bell. After some sanding, the seam line is almost completely invisible. These fit to the aft bulkhead easily and align relatively well. However, The OMS engine bells are slightly angled to the side on the real orbiter, not just upwards like on the kit. The overall shape and profile of the engine bell and its support are also wrong when compared to the real orbiter, so if you prefer accuracy, you need to find a set of replacement engines. Go for main engine start. Well, not exactly. The main engines on this kit are simple and easy to assemble, for once. However, they're extremely inaccurate to the RS-25s that powered the Realspace Shuttle. Thankfully, there's plenty of replacement parts online for more accurate engine bells. For my builds, I used the Updraft Model Works Space Shuttle main engines. More information about them later. At this point, overall assembly of the orbiter is complete and we move on to the payload. The included payload is the Space Lab research module, with the science palette behind it. The Space Lab on this kit is completely inaccurate to what Space Lab turned out to be, and so are the markings, though the included set is accurate to various concepts brought up in the years before the shuttle program. Assembly of the pressurized module is simple, with two halves and end caps coming together to form it. The fit on these parts is bad, but not as bad as other sections in the kit. The transfer tube is simple as well, though it leaves clear joint lines between the two halves after being assembled. This can be easily fixed by sanding though. The science palette includes an infrared telescope, two magnetic field research probes, and a few simple parts. These are easy to assemble and they can move once finished. The only complaint I have in this section is the clear plastic lens of the telescope is super hard to fit into the assembled telescope, and it's incredibly easy to stain the clear part. Do not sand the clear parts under any circumstances, as it will leave an ugly finish behind which will ruin the look of your model. Fitting the Space Lab module and science palette into the payload bay is a nightmare once again. It's damn near impossible to align everything properly and fit it in without breaking something due to the sheer force necessary to get everything to fit right. You may be better off cutting off the pegs on the underside of the Space Lab module in order to get it to fit right. Now we assemble the flight deck cover. This part fits into the slot in the fuselage to cover the flight deck, but it is designed to be removable so you can see the flight deck. The fit is adequate. Not the best, not the worst. The control panel fits decently, but the docking windows don't fit all that well. Like the payload bay windows, they require some modification in the form of cutting off bits of the sides to fit properly. Once fit, they are relatively smooth with the rest of the cover. 4 decals are included to add details to the panels. Here, there are absolutely no hints or references to the proper orientation of the decals, so I just guessed based on images of the Space Shuttle crew cabin. Feel free to use mine as a reference. Moving on to the Canada arm. 4 pieces make up this part, none of which are glued. Once the 4 pieces are snapped together, the attachment point goes into the left side of the payload bay. Once this attachment is clicked into place, there is no way to remove it without risking breaking the attachment point. A Canada logo decal is included, but once again the instructions leave it to the modeler to guess where it goes along the arm. Using images from the shuttle in orbit helps me determine where I put it on mine. Once painted and assembled, the arm moves freely. Opening the next step are the payload bay doors. These are designed to be interactive, where they can be positioned open or closed. The door hinges required some sanding and trimming to ensure a snug fit. After painting the door white, I added the silver radiator panels. The forward panels are designed to move freely, though this is rather pointless since they will fall over when the doors are open. They also make moving the doors into the closed position slightly more difficult. The final addition to the payload bay is the twin antenna which sits on the science palette. In order to have the antenna fully extended, the payload bay needs to be in an open position, otherwise the antenna blocks it from closing. The instructions provide directions on where to cut the antenna to allow for the movement of the payload bay. For my kits, I simply leave the antenna unglued so I can attach the antenna when I open the doors and remove it when I close them. Finishing the assembly is the landing gear. We can have them extended or retracted. The wheels do not roll. The parts for the landing gear fit together crudely as per usual, and the instructions provide no reference for the angle which they are supposed to sit at. I guessed the angle by dry fitting the 2 sections into the gear bay, then gluing them after proper alignment. Once the gears are glued, they fit into the base tightly and securely. They do a good job of holding the model securely in place. Once I finished building, it was off to the paint shop. I painted the entire model in a base coat of flat white, then I did the black tile sections. From there I finished the gray reinforced carbon panels on the wings and nose. The instructions say to use a variety of different paints in different sections, but I just went with my own methods instead. One thing I can say about painting space shuttles in general is how difficult it is. Since we are painting two completely opposite colors, it's almost guaranteed that one will stain the other. With my method, it was usually the black paint staining the white. Painting alone took me a week. Strangely, the instructions show the area near the cockpit windows needs to be painted black, but this is unnecessary, just paint it white like the surrounding area. They also have the gray RCC misaligned with the raised RCC panel details on the model itself. The rest of the paint instructions are mostly accurate and reliable for where certain paint goes. Even though the instructions have us paint different areas of the white surfaces with different white paints, I chose to use flat white only. You don't really need to use all the different white paints the instructions say to. Once I applied the paint, I finished building the model and moved on to fine detailing. I painted on smaller details and touched up imperfections, then weathered the orbiters. I highlighted the tiled areas by painting a layer of water-diluted black paint to create a stained and burnt appearance. I used diluted brown paint on some of the parts as well. Next, it was time for decal application. The decals on this kit are made with high quality and precise tracing around the edges. This serves as a double-edged sword, however, since the decals do not properly slide from the backing paper. Instead, they require substantial pull or push to get them to move, posing the risk of breaking them. Thankfully, the decals on this kit are thick and harder to break than most. Decal softener is an absolute must for this kit, since a lot of decals are applied on surfaces with raised details. I used Vallejo water-based solution for this, though I don't exactly recommend it since some of my decals didn't set all the way. As I mentioned earlier, the instructions don't do a very good job of directing which decals go where. Some are straight up unaccounted for. The decals which are unaccounted for include decals 39, 40, and 41, which are the payload bay hinges on the left side. Decals 26 are two boxed areas on the crew cabin, and decal 107, which is the Canada arm decal. Incorrectly numbered decals include decal 80, the aft external tank attachment points. These are numbered as decals 64 and 90. Decal 84 is the black thermal protection system aft of the wing reinforced carbon-carbon on the bottom, numbered as decal 59. This kit includes decals for some of the white sections of the orbiter. The decals in this kit are very thick, so applying the white decals on the black painted sections has a minimal color difference. Still, on my Columbia model, the difference was noticeable on the vertical stabilizer. Even after attempting to blend it, the difference is still highly visible. I had to cut the decal due to the black thermal protection system around the silts pod. On the left side, I cut the white decal further to replicate the towel pattern. On the right side, I painted over it since I scratched the left side pretty hard by cutting it. For my Challenger build, I chose not to use the white decal for the vertical stabilizer. Decals 46, 47, 56, 61, 70, and 71 comprise the black thermal protection system on the ohms pods and base of the vertical stabilizer. These decals were extremely hard to position and conform to the surface. A great deal of decal softener was required. Even then, they weren't without issues. Some creases were left behind on both my Challenger and Columbia models. I did not use decals 82, 83, 84, or 85, which comprise the black thermal protection system aft of the reinforced carbon-carbon panels, so I cannot speak on how they fit to the model. Decals 94 and 95 are for the tiles on the wing chines. I use these on my Challenger build. These decals are too long, so I shortened them by breaking them in half and overlapping them. After that, they had an excellent fit to the model. The decals for the payload bay hinges do not align with each other. I applied the decals for the hinges on the doors themselves first. For the left side, decal 40 and 41. For the right side, 74 and 75. I then attached the payload bay doors and split the fuselage hinge decals and aligned them manually. Decal 39 for the left side and 73 for the right side. For the payload bay vents, the left side decals can be put in cavities in the fuselage. On the right side, there are no reference points to align the placement for these. I measured the position of the ones on the left side using some raised details and other decals as a reference point, then mirrored it on the right side. Decals 27 and 28 are the decals for the cockpit window frames. These do not align with the cockpit windows, and the frames are slightly oversized. Gaps between the black frame and the window itself leave noticeable sections of exposed plastic. I just painted these after the decal dried. The decals also feature an extended section of black tiles under the middle window. This section was exclusive to Discovery, and it was only on the right side windows. I used the remove section to add to the thermal protection system detail on the top of the black tile section in front of the windows. Other decal issues I had due to my own incompetence were mainly the larger decals for the white areas. These decals were on odd surfaces, and no matter how hard I tried, some would simply not conform to the surface. To mitigate this issue, I recommend having the surface of where the decal is being applied facing up, so gravity does not shift the decal softener as it is softening the decal. This ensures optimal conforming. I built strange-looking contraptions out of Lego bricks to hold the orbiter on its side for both the Columbia and Challenger builds. Any decals I did not specifically mention or discuss went onto the model with ease, and I had little to no problem applying them. In general, the decals on this kit are great, though some are harder to work with than others. One thing I really appreciate about the decals on this kit is the coloring of the titles, specifically the NASA logos and American flags. The colors are 100% accurate to the colors on the Space Shuttle, something that most other kits and decal sets across the different scales failed to achieve. The only inaccuracy with the decals on this kit are the United States titles. The space between the United and States words is too large, but it can be shortened by separating the decal and positioning it correctly. After decal application, I covered the model in several layers of dull coat clear coat, then it was off to display. Overall, this kit is a difficult build, and it rightfully earns its maximum level difficulty. Like I said earlier, it's a challenger indeed. Thankfully, it has an excellent decal set to help in detailing the model, and combining this with other third-party decal sets will help to produce a beautiful replica of American spaceflight history. I found the Realspace and Warbird decals sets most useful for my Challenger build. Links to buy those are in the description below, and my reviews for those are also in the description below. There are many other accessories and replacement parts at your disposal, including engine replacement sets, cockpit update sets, and all sorts of other accessories. I found the SSME replacement set from Updraft Model Works to be the most detailed and accurate replacement set. I recommend taking a look at those if you want to build this kit. Links to everything I've mentioned and will mention are going to be in the description below. This kit is a tough build. Poor tooling presents a real challenge to any scale modelers regardless of experience level. Even with its poor tooling, this is one of the most detailed scale models of a space shuttle, regardless of its raised line detail and accuracies. The only other competitor it has is the Monogram kit, which has the boosters and external tank, but the orbiter is even worse in terms of tooling quality and accuracy. The Revell kit has an amazing decal set to help with detailing the model, which makes the build slightly easier. Therefore, I recommend this model to those who have the time, space, resources, and patience to build it. Experience with filler putty, sanding, decal softener, and working with small parts and details is a must-have for this kit. It took me almost 2 months to build Columbia start to finish, and 3 weeks to build Challenger from start to finish. Let me just add, 3 weeks is a very unhealthy time frame. Do not rush these builds. I had to rush the Challenger build because I was moving out of my home soon, so I needed to get that done. Finishing both builds was easily one of the most rewarding and proud moments of my modeling career, so the pain is worth it in the end. Not sure if you want to try this kit, but you still want a space shuttle replica? Got you covered. If you're inexperienced with modeling, try building a 1:200 scale space shuttle by Hasegawa. Those kits are very high quality and they're easy to work with. Those kits are also the first ones I built before working my way up to building this monster. You can also try the Tamiya 1:100 scale space shuttle. I've never built it, but I've read it's a solid kit as well. Stay away from any of the 1:144th scale kits, since those have old toolings and similar build quality issues to this one. I built the 1:144th scale kit from Revell, and I will confidently say the 1:72nd scale kit is far easier to work with. Not that either of them are easy to build in the first place. My review on the 1:144th scale kit is also linked in the description. That was a lot of talking, but at long last the video is over. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Feel free to tell me what you think of the video and any experience you have with building these kits. I'd love to hear it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I will happily answer those and give advice on how to deal with specific parts of the build if you're building this kit or any of the others I've built. That's all I've got for you. Happy building, happy collecting. Take care of yourself. See you later.